That I'm Bruce Wilson, and you have a program that tells you who's all speaking and gives you a little notion of who they are. We have one addition to the program. Between Jayne Thorson and Carmen Green, Marjorie Ziefert is going to have a few remarks from Carol's book group. So we're getting one more perspective. And I'm not going to go into long introductions for anybody. We're going to start out with Two Brothers, and Robert, you are up first.
I am Carol's brother, Bob, known to the immediate family as Robert. I have struggled with that all of my life. Carol was born on October 28, 1949 in Windsor, Ontario, Canada. We were living in Canada because our father was involved in setting up a Canadian operation of a small American company. Carol was born 2 months before her scheduled date. She weighed only 3 pounds. She spent the first month of her life in an incubator, fighting to survive and gain her health. This probably established Carol's competitive nature, which played an important part in her life. Well, our parents struggled with a name for our baby sister. I, who was then 9, suggested she be named Carol because she was supposed to have been born about Christmas. My 3-year-old brother liked the name Suzanne, so surprisingly, our parents ended up accepting our names, and that is how our sister became Carol Suzanne Hollenshead. At the time of Carol's birth, a wonderful woman named Evelyn Shepherd came to live with our family. My then 3-year-old brother Neill named her Shep, and that nickname stuck for our family. Shep lived with our family until 1955, when we moved from Windsor to Port Huron, Michigan. Although Shep helped our family, she was not a nanny. She was a very competent woman in her own right, had a little, what they call beauty counselor business. It was like Avon, which she operated out of her room in the house. She was also very active with Canadian Girl Guides, which is the same thing as the Girl Scouts in the United States. In addition, she was active with the Canadian Red Cross, and she held prominent positions in both organizations. Finally, she was also very active with her church, All Saints Church, which was an Anglican church in Windsor. While we lived in Windsor, we also became close with Shep's father, Tom Longley, and Carol nicknamed him Tom Tom. And there was, in addition, Shep's sisters, Maudie and Molly. Our family maintained our relationship with Shep and her family the entire time of their lives. While I walked at 9 months, Carol talked at 9 months. Early on, Carol took to talking on the telephone, whether it be make-believe or real. Maybe this was the start of her career as an orator, and when she did her time with her program on WUOM while she was with the University of Michigan's Office of Gerontology. Carol's love for talking on the telephone continued on into her teenage years. When our father's boss was unhappy about constantly being unable to reach Dad because Carol was on the telephone, he insisted that we get a separate line for Carol. So Carol, at a young age, had her own telephone and telephone listing, which was kind of unique for somebody her age. In addition to our family and Shep, Carol also had someone else who was concerned about her welfare. Our family dog, Laddie, a collie mix, kept close watch over Carol and got very upset when my brother and Neill would roughhouse. Laddie also became completely upset when Carol started to ride a bicycle. That continued on the entire time Carol was riding a bike. One time when Carol was returning from grade school on her bicycle, she fell off her bike and was actually knocked unconscious. Because of this incident, our mother thought that Laddie must have had some sort of premonition of Carol's situation with bicycles. Carol also early started demonstrating a competitive nature. She demonstrated it on brother Neill. I'll let Neill tell you more about that competition, but I will state that Carol became a stronger swimmer before Neill did. Now, Carol was well known for her righteous feminism. When she indicated that she was going to keep her maiden name of Hollenshead when she got married, I tried to discourage her because of all of the then problems that would exist. Mind you, this is a few years ago. I was happy she did not listen to me on that. When my wife Lily and I married 19 years ago, there was no question that Lily was going to be Lily G and never Lily Hollenshead. Additionally, I'm glad Carol held on to Hollenshead because we're a rather rare name and Wilson is awfully common. I will start winding up here and let my brother next cover matters. But I want and finish to say that over the years, I have always enjoyed my times with my baby sister Carol. These times included visits at their cottage in Alpena, as well as their homes in Ann Arbor and Dexter. Family gatherings at Carol's and Bruce's over the years included Christmas, Thanksgiving, as well as wedding receptions, baby showers, and all sorts of other activities. I enjoyed all of that time very much. In closing, I want to say that I do very much miss my baby sister, who was a wonderful and very competent woman. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Hi, I'm Neill Hollenshead, Carol's other brother. Beginning with her premature birth, Carol Suzanne was a strong-willed fighter. Her English and Irish genes were helpful to her, but she also had a very fierce internal drive of her own that enabled her to overcome many of the challenges that were thrown at her. In her early years, these challenges included 2 older brothers who were not always kind and supportive of her, especially me. And Earl, our demanding Depression-era father, who was one of 4 sons and who didn't always appreciate his daughter and the skills and capabilities that she had. I think this male environment helped to instill in Carol, though, a certain righteous indignation, competitive drive, and self-confidence that later blossomed into determined and accomplished feminist and nurturing mother capabilities. Carol was 3 years younger than me, the middle child, whose purpose in life was to try to do everything that my brother Bob did, but do it better. My job was also to put down and question the value of a younger female sibling. When Carol was young, I teased her. I threw books at her and other things, and I called her fat, which was very hurtful to her and not the case. Later, I just tended to ignore her. However, there were times when we were free-range children living on the outskirts of Windsor, and she would tag along on my adventures. When I was about 6 and she was about 3, we were playing down the street, and somehow I ended up with an archery arrow stuck in my cheek. This was one of my misadventures. I remember Carol running along behind me as I sped home for an emergency trip to the doctor, still holding that arrow stuck in my bleeding cheek. Later, when I was about 10 or 11, I was shocked by a serious competitive challenge from Carol that Bob alluded to. It was an area that I was destined to consider to be very important to me, water sports. Both Carol and I were taking swimming lessons at the local YMCA in Port Huron, and she was doing much better than me. How could this be? She was younger and she was just a girl. This was one of my first clues that my sister was a person who could make a significant mark on the world. Although Carol's male side of the family often failed to give her credit that she deserved during her formative years, she was strongly supported by 2 very special and loving women. One was her mother, Marjorie, a full-time homemaker, who showered us all with unconditional love, but also generated high internal expectations from an early age. The other was Evelyn Shepherd, whom Bob described. Shep, as I called her, was a strong, independent, proper, and well-groomed woman who became a very important role model and member of our family, especially for Carol. Much later, Carol and Bruce named their daughter Evelyn in honor of Shep. In terms of family names, as Bob explained, Carol was a pioneer in fighting to keep her maiden name after marriage. In addition, she sought to promote the idea of daughters being given their mother's maiden name and sons being given their father's last name. Thus, Bruce and Carol's son is called Anthony Wilson, and later their daughter was named Evelyn Hollenshead. Even though Carol and I did not overlap much in school, and she had her own circle of friends, all that began to change when she left Port Huron and started college at U of M. I was a senior there when she was a freshman on a prestigious academic scholarship. By that point, I had somehow grown a little wiser and a little more appreciative of Carol's talents and abilities. For example, I had been on SGC, the Student Government Council, during the turbulent 60s. Then, she successfully ran for the council as a freshman and got the largest vote total of any candidate ever. Thus squashing my fragile ego but good. As young adults, we began to forge a lifetime bond of closeness and love that later extended to include our tightly linked families and children, the cousins, my sons Ben and Sam, with Anthony and Evelyn, who shared time with Bruce's parents, Rose and Jean Wilson, and our niece, Lori Walters. I've been blessed to know and love two Carol Hollensheads. First, my sister, Carol Suzanne Hollenshead, and second, my wife, Carol Kinderman Hollenshead, who is referred to in the family as CL. The Carol Hollensheds, Bruce and I have traveled to many places together, and when CL and I moved from Virginia and returned to Ann Arbor in the mid-'80s, it was largely because we wanted our families and us to grow up and spend time together. I will say, though, that the overlapping professional lives, reputations, and friends of the two Carol Hollensheads in Ann Arbor provided some amusing incidents and points of confusion. Collectively, though, Carol Hollenshead was an amazing, larger-than-life superwoman. The one is director of the U of M Center of Education of Women, and the other is a well-known practicing attorney in Ann Arbor. Sometimes, with this commonality of names, confusion occurred, and messages got misdirected to and about the wrong Carol Hollenshead. Initially, an Ann Arbor District Library clerk, who must have been concerned with identity theft, refused to issue my wife a library card and confronted her saying, "I know Carol Hollenshead, and you are not Carol Hollenshead." Later, because the two Carols went to the same hair salon, my sister mistakenly wound up with my wife's hair color. Fortunately, the colors weren't that very different, but after that, the hair salon made sure to distinguish between Carol S. and Carol K. Hollenshead. Since CL and I retired 5 years ago to Arizona, Carol and Bruce regularly came out to the West Coast to share our sunshine in the depths of winter, and CL and I would visit them here in Michigan in the summer and the fall. At the end of my sister's life, I was privileged to spend about 6 weeks helping Bruce and spending time with Carol while she was at home in hospice. I saw her joyfully celebrate her 69th birthday with her family, including Finn, who is right here in front of me, who had just been born the day before her 69th birthday. In closing, I have a couple of examples of how Carol saw life as a thrilling adventure. About 10 years ago, Carol, Bruce, CL and I, and our son Ben, and his wife Karen, were on a 43-foot sailboat in Puerto Rico in the U.S. Virgin Islands. We had spent the night at an anchorage on the east end of Vieques, which is an island off Puerto Rico, and until then had been used as a U.S. Navy bombing practice area. In the morning, we awoke to someone on the beach calling us on the radio and telling us that we had to up anchor and leave immediately because they were going to be blowing up ordnance there on the beach. So we left, and we hightailed it out of the anchorage into heavy seas and with a storm brewing on our way to St. Thomas. Unfortunately, Carol, Karen, and I were hit with seasickness, and Karen in particular was quite worried. In response, Carol explained and demonstrated to Karen how to deal with such difficult situations. As we crashed down on each increasingly high wave, Carol would face into the wind and shout, "Wee! Wee! Wee!" I also saw evidence of this positive view of life that Carol had on a hand towel that was prominently displayed in Carol and Bruce's guest bathroom. The towel had a quote by the author Hunter Thompson printed on it, which said, "Life should not be a journey to the grave with the intention of arriving safely in a pretty and well-preserved body, but rather to skid in broadside, in a cloud of smoke, thoroughly used up, totally worn out, and loudly proclaiming, 'Wow, what a ride!'" Today I miss my sister greatly, but I know that her indomitable and loving spirit lives on each day through all of the many people that she touched so deeply, including me.
Hello everyone, it's good to be back in Ann Arbor. My cue for being here to speak with you this afternoon came in a message from Bruce. who wrote, "Carol told me on multiple occasions how important the YMCA was to her. It seems to me there was a program maybe called High Y or something like that. In spite of how fondly she remembered it, I don't think anyone in the family was really aware of what it was right about." That's my cue. My friendship with Carol began during our high school days in the 60s. As you know, she went to high school in Port Huron. I went to high school in Dearborn. We met at statewide conferences, planning groups, and meetings sponsored by high school social clubs associated with the YMCA. High Y for the boys, Try High Y for the girls. The purpose of these clubs, and listen carefully, to create, maintain, and extend to the fullest capacity of one's ability throughout the home, school, and community, high standards of moral character through improvement, brother, sisterhood, equality, and service. I think both Carol and I saw these activities that we were engaged in as political and social, and that was one of the foundations of our friendship. My memory of spending time with Carol those days, she was as awesome then as she was all her life. She was intelligent, smart, composed, with incredible interpersonal and political instincts and skills. I recall sitting around the table with her, brainstorming one thing or another. Working with her was seamless, as I'm sure many of you here have experienced. We were creative, productive, collegial, before I knew what that word meant, and fun. And I'm truly honored to say that we became friends for the next 50 years. To rekindle my memory of those days, I did a little research of news articles from the Times-Herald of Port Huron from 1960 to 1967. Reading those articles was not just a journey back in time for me, but they reflected an arc over time of Carol's many interests, values, and talents that began in those young days and continued throughout her life. Perhaps one of her first YMCA experiences that perhaps gave a hint of things to come was described in an August 1960 article titled "Honor Campers at YMCA Camp Agawam." Carol's cabin, the Scooby-Dooers, was awarded as the cabin with the most honor days. Carol was 10 years old. I found an April 1965 article describing the 3-day state YMCA youth conference. Conference themes included principles into action, principles in action, and approaches to better world understanding. I found a September 1965 article with a very cool photo of Carol with 2 other young women stating, "Members of the Crusaders Try High Y will present a style show of clothes to be sewn at home. The photo shows Carol and her friends wearing the dresses that they made." Carol, obviously, was one of the organizers and was a commentator of the show, while other members of the club modeled the dresses. For this one, read leader, organizer, women's self-reliance, crusader. Then there was a July 1965 article about Carol and 2 other young women from Port Huron with another vintage photo, preparing to attend an annual High Y, Try High Y conference in Northfield, Minnesota, to participate in a series of seminars and assemblies designed to enhance participants' leadership abilities. Got it? There are several more articles with similar themes and storylines, and photos. Activities, folk song club, National Honor Society fundraiser, March of Dimes fundraiser, and so on. But enough. You get the picture. I'd like to conclude with one last article. To me, quintessential Carol. In May of 1967, with days left in her senior year, Carol is spokesperson and organizer, whereby students offer babysitting and transportation to residents to enable them to vote on the school operating levy, to raise funds for the school, with students also going to factory gates to hand out literature to workers going to and from work. On this one, read, home, family, community, political sensibility, leadership, and service. It's our Carol. Thank you.
I don't usually read things when I give talks, but I think I can get through this if I don't read it. So, Carol hired me to be her assistant at the Institute of Gerontology in 1978, 40 years ago. Harold Johnson, who's sitting there, was director at the time. It was a great job and a fun place to be, especially because she and I became fast friends. We had an almost instant rapport. I learned so much from Carol in that position, how to write award-winning proposals, how to be strategic, how to network, how to be an advocate. She was amazingly skilled in all these areas, and I was in awe. A couple of months ago, I said to her on one of my visits, "For years, I thought we were the best proposal writers ever. Later, I realized that the federal government was dumping money into gerontology in those days. Everything we wrote just about got funded." Her reply was, "I like to think we were actually pretty good, even if funding was easier." And of course, she was right. She was a master. As we became friends, I began spending huge amounts of time at Carol and Bruce's house. They were grown-ups in my view. They owned a house, they had a young son, they had a dog, they had a yard. It was a shock to discover that actually they were younger than me. They seemed so grounded. Soon I was taking turns cooking dinner with them, although Bruce was always a better cook than me, and still is, several nights a week. Their generosity and openness were such a gift to me at that time in my life. When I met my husband Art in 1980, they offered their house for our wedding. We were married in the middle room of their lovely Victorian home, and the reception was in the yard. I know they worked really hard to get things ready for us, and we are eternally grateful. Evelyn and our daughter Tilly were born about 5 months apart. Having little girls together allowed us to be moms together, arrange play dates, share vacations to South Haven and Michigania and Alpena, and eventually go to dance lessons and concerts together. Carol's and my friendship ebbed and flowed over 40 years in terms of the amount of time we spent together. Some years we were both busy or traveling and saw little of one another, but we were always able to pick up where we left off. Over the years, I often consulted Carol about work-related crises, and her counsel was always insightful and wise. Unlike with most of my friendships, we did not seem to feel the need to fill every moment with talk. We could just be present silently at times, whether in the hot tub, walking somewhere, or meeting for coffee. It wasn't until I started really thinking about our friendship during these last months that I recognized and appreciated this quality of just being. We spent more regular time together the past few years, sometimes doing projects, sometimes just being together. Occasionally, but not often, we talked about Carol's illness and the decisions she made. and the ways in which her daily life was impacted. Having watched 3 friends die in the past 5 years, I came to viscerally understand just how individual this process is. I have such admiration for the ways in which both Carol and Bruce chose to handle this. Not only did they learn how to live in the present and grab every moment of living and exploring that they could, but they also seem to have really functioned as a team. Even close to the end, Bruce made sure Carol was involved in daily life in every way possible. These last few months, I tried to visit Carol once a week. As she talked less, we spent more time just being present together, which our earlier friendship made comfortable and possible. Even in her frailty, I felt her strength and her resolve. She was a remarkable woman. I miss the way she said, "How are you?" with that trill in her voice that somehow conveyed her generosity and warmth. Her friendship to me was a huge gift.
I'm Kirsten Elling, and I'm grateful for the invitation to bring remarks on behalf of the CEW family today. I first met Carol almost 13 years ago when she interviewed me for the Associate Director position at CEW. I was nervous, of course, and recall the first meeting as a very unique combination of being thoroughly grilled by Carol and at the same time really hitting it off. A 1-hour interview turned into 2, and I left knowing I had just met someone incredibly special. A woman as intellectually powerful as she was warm, funny, fearless, and passionate about the work of CEW. I was beyond thrilled when she hired me and consider myself lucky to have worked with and been mentored by her. I joined CEW late in Carol's 20-year tenure, and my initial impression of her only deepened as I learned all that she and the CEW team had accomplished over the years. The list is long, and we're under strict time limits, but here are a few highlights. One of Carol's first goals as director was to increase the attention to women's issues across campus, and by 1989, she had convinced President Duderstadt to create the President's Advisory Council on Women's Issues, PACWI, to help women achieve full and equal participation in all aspects of life and leadership at the university. PACWI promoted the development of new policies, practices, and procedures designed to enhance gender and racial equality. Much of CEW's advocacy work in future years leveraged the power of PACWI. An iconic achievement of Carol and PACWI was successfully advocating for a U of M-wide policy that would stop the tenure clock for faculty who were welcoming a new child. Carol recognized the importance of supportive professional networks for women and was key to establishing the Women of Color Academy Project in '95 and the Junior Women's Faculty Network in '98. In 2002, the Women of Color Task Force became part of the center. You can see why a few years ago when U of M launched its Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Plan, CEW was called out as a foundational diversity unit at U of M. Carol was always ahead of the curve. Carol also recognized the importance of leadership development for women in addressing the glass ceiling and made leadership a part of CEW's mission. Under her direction, CEW created a number of leadership initiatives, including the Michigan Women's Leadership Project, which targeted the executive directors of Michigan nonprofit organizations that serve women and girls. The Women of Color in the Academy Project, the Junior Women Faculty Network, and the Women of Color Task Force all incorporated leadership development into their scope. The New Millennium Leaders was a leadership program for staff and became a part of CEW. Additionally, Carol led groundbreaking research on non-tenure track faculty, women faculty, and family-friendly policies. She started the Twink Fry Visiting Social Activist Program to support female activists and expand their network while also engaging them with individuals on campus and in the community. She established CEW as a national presence. CEW received numerous awards under Carol's leadership, including from the National Council for Research on Women, demonstrating the power and value of research and informed action in 2005. Carol contributed immeasurably to CW's stability by embracing development work. She secured CW's first major endowment of $1 million towards the Margaret Tosley Scholarship. This funding has been the backbone of our scholarship program since 1990. Most of the major endowments that enable us to bring women and diverse leaders to campus are a direct result of Carol's work. These funds are key to our ability to be visible on campus, cultivate strategic partners, and highlight leaders from diverse backgrounds, something that enriches the U of M campus for all, but especially for women and underserved students. Additionally, she raised funds for rainy days, which have protected the center through rough years and enabled us to be a stable presence on campus. And while all of these accomplishments are notable and impactful, today it seems fitting to pay special mention to how she did all of this. She was a dynamic leader who knew how to engage her team and other stakeholders in her vision. She knew it takes the united work of many to make a difference and was tireless in her pursuit of social justice. When I reached out to former CW staff and other colleagues who worked with Carol to gather input for today, my inbox was soon filled with heartfelt tributes. Dr. Lester Montz, U of M professor and former senior vice provost, wrote, "Since '93, I had the good pleasure to work with Carol, first as an ally on diversity issues and later as a direct report to me in my former VP role. My admiration and fondness for Carol derived from her commitment to fairness for all. She was a mainstay and productive participant in every initiative to improve the lives of women, faculty, staff, and students in particular. Many individuals and groups from these categories continue to benefit from Carol's involvement in building infrastructure within CW for the Women of Color Task Force and the Women of Color in the Academy. Carol was a major force and contributor to social justice and equality. I continue to miss her influence and counsel in our community." Dr. Gloria Thomas, who was Carol's successor as CW director, shared, "Carol was fearless in her pursuit of social justice and gender equity. She never backed down from a fight. Instead, she would engage critical stakeholders to strategically plan how best to go to battle and win. She fought on behalf of women in their unjustifiably tenure denial cases and in instances of racial, gender, sexual discrimination and harassment, as well as unfair treatment of mothers, whether students, faculty, staff, or postdocs, particularly those from low-income backgrounds. Carol helped the university become the best institution that it could possibly be by holding the institution and its leaders accountable for living up to the values of fairness, equity, and inclusion that it espoused. Michigan undoubtedly is a better university as a result of Carol's efforts." Twink Fry, a longtime CW supporter, wrote, "Carol has been a mentor, an inspirational leader, and oh so wise. It's been an honor to know her, be a dear friend, and create together opportunities to support young women in the Ann Arbor area and beyond. Her legacy will continue because of her progressive thinking, listening, and caring to those around her, so each person's voice is heard as she collaborated in all her endeavors." Dr. Tiffany Mara, CW's current director, reflected, "Over the past 2 years, Carol has been a great mentor, willing to have difficult conversations and providing constant encouragement that change is necessary and possible. I am humbled by her strength, vision, and courage, and in awe of the remarkable changes she created across the state. At U of M, she ensured that gender and race were considered on campus, and she successfully lobbied for paid maternity leave well before it was the norm. She created programs encouraging women to consider education and employment as options, and as they advanced, provided the training and support they needed to ensure they were successful. These are only a few examples of her awe-inspiring life's work. Her vision will forever guide and inspire the work of CEW. There isn't time enough to read all the wonderful tributes that we received, but Tiffany and I plan to compile them and share with Carol's family. As you can imagine, themes of Carol's inclusivity, mentorship, strategic brilliance, impact, and resilience were repeated throughout the comments we received. In honor of her impactful, dedicated efforts, the Carol Hollenshead Award for Excellence in Promoting Equity and Social Change was established upon her retirement from the center. This award honors faculty and staff whose sustained efforts, like Carol's, have resulted in greater equity in regard to gender, race, class, age, disability, gender identity, or sexual orientation. The last time I and other CW staff saw Carol was at our event in October, which included the presentation of the Hollenshead Award for excellence in promoting social change. I remarked at how meaningful it was that she was able to come, and Bruce replied, actually, she was in no way in good enough condition to be here tonight, but she was determined to get here anyway, rising above her physical limitations to be there. Quintessential Carol. In the lobby before the program started, a woman came up to Carol, recognizing her, and began thanking her with heartfelt emotion and overwhelming gratitude. "You helped me go back to college," she said. "When I had kids and a job, you helped me find a way to finish my education." Lori, Carol's niece, put it beautifully when she observed that what was so moving about this moment was that it was one woman's deep gratitude representing thousands. Thousands is right. The ways that Carol's legacy lives on are vast and continue to grow. We see her legacy reflected in the lives of CW Council participants who get the support they need to achieve their dreams, in the expansion of our constituency to include a wider array of underserved populations, and in the endowments Carol started that allow us to do creative, cutting-edge programming and advocacy work. We feel Carol's continued impact through the CW scholars who've been able to finish their degrees and make a better life for their families, the faculty who enjoy a more equitable climate, and the staff who worked closely with her, who credit her mentorship with their career achievements. To have someone like Carol believe in you helps you believe in yourself. That belief is contagious and empowering, and pretty soon you're doing things you didn't know you could. So thank you, Carol, for believing in all of us and in the critical work of CW. We thank you for your courage, your vision, your ability to advocate for change. We are grateful for the opportunity to continue this work, and we will do our very best to make you proud as we carry your legacy forward.
Good afternoon.
I'm Colleen Dolan Green, and this is my friend Barbara Murphy. I am not Sue Kaufman. We are here to talk about a group of women who've been getting together on a monthly basis since 1984 at the brunch group.
We will always remember Carol as a warrior for justice, but she also for us was one of the fiercest friends we had. Today we want to talk about our friendship through what we call the brunch group. As one of our organizers in chief, Carol first met over lunch with me and with Brenda Smith. The purpose was to invite well-placed administrative women from throughout the university and to create a much-needed old girls network. Talk turned to friends who didn't necessarily know each other, but who would enjoy each other. Invitations went out, and brunch took place complete with elegant tea service and wonderful food in Carol's lovely home on 2nd Street. Biographies and work stories flew, and at the end, Susan Lipschitz, then assistant to the president, said we should do it again, and I'll host next month's brunch. Thus, the brunch group began its first of 382 gatherings, and we're still counting, and created not only a professional old girls network, but a tremendous reservoir of personal support and lasting friendships.
Much serious work was accomplished. You've heard today of some of those efforts and policies. They were debated, discussed, fleshed out, not only in university offices, but around our dining room tables. These included the formation of the President's Commission on Women, that you've just heard about, the maternity leave policy, stopping the tenure clock, combating sexual harassment, and many more. I have a vivid memory of seeing Carol on the floor in labor for Evelyn as we were finalizing one of those policies. Sometimes one of our requests for personal support and problem solving highlighted issues that affected many others. One of us confessed exhaustion of the press of work while caring for a young child. After several suggestions about organization and delegation, The brunch group always has suggestions. We decided that actually that person had too much to do, and we recognized that professional and personal often intersect. And we knew we could do more for others just as we were doing for each other by making a more humane office policies and for both official and unofficial ways to bring and understand the real lives of our students, our faculty, and the other staff. We also developed a dynamite list of other women who could join us as we work to change these policies. The group also achieved a bit of notoriety with our male bosses, who often wonder to each other, what do they talk about at brunch? The conclusion of a few vice presidents, provosts, and a president was that we were talking about them. Now, in honesty, a little bit that was true. But also, a lot of workplace solutions and paths for professional advancement were launched within our group. Support for an idea in one of our offices magically received support across the university. Plus, we supported each other in our career trajectories, sometimes requiring us to move beyond the University of Michigan. The brunch group utilized a well-known practice that the Old Boys Network had been using, namely recommending colleagues when a position vacancy was announced. This practice resulted in 2 of our members becoming vice presidents at other universities, and I had to go to the corporate world to do that. A number of our group also went on to not only serve on boards, volunteer and elected boards, but to chair those boards.
And of course, with Carol leading the way, we were beating the drum for women candidates at every turn. We worked outside the university. We attended our first Emily's List fundraiser in Carol's home, raised money to combat domestic violence and support survivors, and followed Carol and Bruce to dance performances and gymnastic meets to support our women students. Through the brunch group, we have lived the arc of our lives. Over 4,596 cups of coffee and tea. We took on 33 new jobs, 52 volunteer positions, loved 3 new babies for a total of 18 children, and now have 25 grandchildren. We welcomed 2 new husbands into our extended family. Since we all know that behind many successful women, there is a good man, they became known as the Behinds. We especially appreciate Bruce's extensive role in making Carol's journey a celebration of life, and near the end, making it possible for us to have one last brunch gathering at her home. We have shared diaper brands and resumes,
Recipes and job announcements,
political victories and political nightmares,
tips for dealing with unruly students, unruly children, and unruly faculty. We have survived 1 divorce, 2 moves out of state, and now we are coping, like all of you, with the death of another member of our brunch group. Pringle once said that the depth of our friendship comes from the regularity rather than the frequency of our monthly gatherings. It also has been the result of our trust in each other, our trust in each other's judgment, our trust in each other's dependability, and our ability to laugh heartily always. Nobody had a better laugh than Carol. No one could serve as a better example of our friendship than Carol. We will miss her.
I've been a really close friend of Carol's for 30 years. I remember the day we met. Both Carol and I realized instantly that this was going to be a deep, important and meaningful friendship. I remember that day, she said to me, I want you to get to know my kids, and I want you to get to know Bruce. Note that she didn't say, I want you to meet my family. She said, I want you to get to know my family. Boy, was that good advice. I have such fond memories of Anthony and Ev and Bruce, individually and as a family. One of Carol's most prominent features, a core belief that made Carol Carol, was how proud she was of her kids. Even during those awkward teenage years, Carol remained as proud of them as she could be. As they've become adults and started their own families, she became even more proud, if that's possible. Anthony and Ev, I hope you guys know that, and I hope that today you feel that. As you've heard from the other speakers today, Carol had many, many interests. And along the way, she made many, many choices. The number one best choice that she ever made, without even a close second, was Bruce Wilson. She and Bruce, to see them together always, just made you smile. They loved each other so much, they adored each other, and they just plain loved being with each other. It was tremendous. When Carol was diagnosed with breast cancer 15 years ago, that love became even more apparent. To watch them as they traveled through this adventure, their love, their admiration, their respect, their caring, and Bruce, your increasing role as a caretaker was wonderful to see. Bruce, you gave Carol not only a beautiful, beautiful life, but in the last several months, you gave her, a beautiful death. One day, I didn't think my body could produce any more tears for him. That's wrong. There's barely been a day that's gone by that I haven't reached for the phone to call Carol or thought, oh, I should tell Carol about that. Or, oh, I wonder what Carol thinks about this. And that's not quite every single day now. You guys will miss her too. God, Carol, love those grandkids. Anthony and Ev, after you each married a really outstanding woman and had 2 kids of your own, that was, Carol thought, her crowning achievement. Now, her role in that could be argued. She is so proud of you. I I know that I won't always be reaching for the phone. But I'll always be wishing that Carol was still here. I know she's always going to have a place in my heart, and I miss her tremendously. Georgia.
Our book club, the Wandering Women, had the pleasure and privilege of sharing this last decade with Carol. Every month since September 2006, we were together in each other's homes to share our love of literature, good food, our political hopes and dashed dreams, as well as the stories of our lives. This was not an easy task for the five of us, as you might discern from our name. We were the Wandering Women, and Carol was not the least wanderer amongst us. But that was not a deterrent. We have Skyped with Vanya Rush in New Mexico, Ada Verlong in South Africa, Val Polipal in England, and me, Marjorie Ziefert, up north. With Carol, we mostly caught her in Arizona, not attempting Bhutan or Vietnam. And today, only two of us are here in person, Ada and I, as Vanya and Val are traveling, but as at this very moment are sharing our tribute to Carol in thought and affection. We have a tradition started by Carol that wherever we travel, we bring each other a small trinket as a commemorative gift. It started with Carol bringing bookmarks, but as you might imagine, with the number of places 5 women can travel in a year, the ratio of bookmarks to books soon exceeded the need or the space. We then moved to other little gifts, indicative of place. As a matter of fact, that's not the only innovation that we can attribute to Carol. She was the first member of our group to bring a Kindle to the group. We do still have some holdouts, but along with Carol, others of us have begun to experience the benefits of Kindle and of even audiobooks. Needless to say, that transition was a source of great discussion in our group. I think it reflected some of our own transitions and adjustments over the course of the last decade. We mostly read novels. Our choices are culturally diverse, focus on people's lives, and although not exclusively so, tend to be about and by women. This combination of choices has led us to become a very close-knit group. The lives of the characters we read about always, in some way, reflect or speak about our own lives, histories, and trigger personal and profound disclosures. Over this time, we became an important support group to each other, regularly checking in about life events and bringing comfort and care between meetings, accompanying each other to doctor's appointments, and bringing nurturing food as needed. As the rest of us Wandering women have talked about Carol since she is gone, we have reflected upon how present she was for all of us. During our time together, some of us have had serious illness, and some of us have had deep losses. And Carol has always been a great source of strength and of hugs. And with dear Bruce, a great source of great Italian food. Out of these experiences, as well as sometimes intense and sometimes very intimate discussions emerging from the books, we got to know each other very well. We all saw in Carol what all of you did, a determination to be a part of this world and a part of changing this world, a remarkable resilience, a profound courage, and a very deep love of people. We will miss her very, very much. I would like to conclude with Wherever, a poem by Muriel Rukeyser that evokes Carol and all of her commitments. Wherever we walk, we will make. Wherever we protest, we will go planting. Make poems, seed grass, feed a child growing, build a house. Whatever we stand against, we will stand feeding and seeding. Wherever I walk, I will make.
So, today, vanity. I don't usually wear glasses, but I need them. I stand before you, her people, honored to speak and united in our need to pay our respects to Carol. Grateful for the fact that she came along to brighten up our days and our lives. Thankful for her mischievous smile, her sense of humor. She got the jokes that most of people didn't get. She made us laugh to the point that you would grab your stomach and find yourself bent over. And then she would laugh. And she'd laugh with that unique, funny laugh. And you kind of wonder where that sound came from. Carol was more than friendly, she was our friend. Carol had a nobility that transcended class. Her eyes took us to a deeper place, a place of truth, and a place that you know that your secrets are safe with her. She made us believe we could do anything. Fiercely independent, she wanted to drive, but knew sometimes it wasn't her place to drive, but knew that somehow she was going to be on that journey with you. She was committed to helping us navigate those turns and adjusting the mirrors. She was more than a teacher, she was a mentor. The very essence of her being was a selfless soul, her compassion and her belief that the human spirit was capable of triumphing over adversity. An advocate for those who were marginalized, disenfranchised, vulnerable, or underrepresented. She raised children. Lori, Evelyn, and Anthony to be pretty much the same. Carol believed in justice and was a catalyst for change. She believed that people should be able to go as far as their talent and their hard work could take them. However, Carol also believed in the role of personal as well as institutional interventions to make these changes that we desired and that we needed. She did that work over and over again through CEW. One of her greatest gifts was intuition, and it was a gift that she used wisely. There are 7.5 billion people in this world, and all it takes is one person to advocate for you and to make a difference in our lives. Her work at CEW made a difference. There are women and men who are now teachers, singers, physicians, who are making a difference in our lives. I first met Carol at CEW in an event that I wasn't certain that I was supposed to be at. Not certain, all of a sudden, I remember how she made me feel. putting out her hand as if I was always supposed to be there. She welcomed me. She made me feel good about being there. She was my friend. I would say she was more than caring, she cared. I would really get to know her in 2012 when, unfortunately, she became my patient. And she was struggling. So I would also say that all of you who've come before me, you would be the gold and I'd be the silver, because I've probably known her the least amount of time. That means I have to work harder. That would be a joke. Carol would get my jokes. You guys are the short bus, but that's okay. Even after leaving CEW and fighting to outsmart cancer, she was a truth teller with this boundless energy which could barely be contained. She was always up for a good fight and stood up for justice and encouraged others to do the same. I remember one time while I was on sabbatical and had transferred her care to someone else. I was trying to tell her that this fight was not hers, that someone else could do it. She looked at me and she said, "I don't need to listen to you. You are not my doctor." She was determined to speak truth to people, and even though her protests now included walking with walking sticks. And here, there are other truths about her authentic humanism and her honesty. I often wondered how she knew so much about and was a kindred spirit with black and brown people. I finally figured it out. And I'm going to let you know about the secret. It's about the hair. Carol is a Canadian African American. And I will tell you, we shared comments about hair. And I was telling her about how I was able to swim. Neill, was it you, Neill? 50 yards in 1.4 seconds. Just FYI. She said, "Get me some of that stuff." And so I came in a few days with Carol's daughter, which is a hair product that's vanilla and black, which actually fits. Look it up. We thought that we were family because we both have Irish descent. And we decided not to do Ancestry 23 because we didn't need it. But I would tell Neill and Robert that, guess who's coming to dinner? Carol was also a gardener. She spent time trying to teach me how to be a gardener, and I would say that it was pretty hopeless when we went to Dexter Mills and I said, "Which of these plants don't need water or fertilizer?" And she tried, and I would say that it didn't go well. She says they do need water and they do need fertilizer. But she gave me her cactus, her 75-year-old cactus, and that big one, the really big one that just bites you in the bottom periodically. And we named it Harriet Tubman, and the smaller one, Ida B. Wells. So I cherish many of the experiences and the time with her. And often we didn't talk, we just sat there for a period of time, long silences, looking through that great window with a picture of you, Anthony, of the beautiful eyes that are just striking behind us, looking at woodpeckers, listening to sparrows, just hanging out. That's how I remember her. There came a point in time in which the cancer started winning its battle over her physical health. And Carol came back to me and says, I want you to be my doctor. I was a little hesitant, and I said, well, whatever journey you're on, I'm going to be on it with you. Halloween would come, and I would come as RBG. She loved it. There would be Christmas in 2017 when I think we all were really scared that this was going to be our last Christmas. And we had a bunch of young people who came into her house. I'd call them the starving artist, who came to sing for Carol, and I saw her whole spirit brighten. They did it all for Bruce's Pizza. Hospice would come. And I felt the loss then, in large part because I didn't have the role of being that physician anymore. When Bruce looked at me, he says, this is Carmen, Carol's very close companion. And then I had a better sense of what this journey was about. Forever ingrained in me is a very pregnant Evelyn snuggled up from mother's bed. And then a few days later, we didn't think it was going to happen. Flynn came and joined Omar, Abe, and Lola. And I would say that remains the good news. The last time I saw Carol was about 3 days prior to her leaving this planet. I had changed my flight so I could actually see her, and not staying very long because she tired easily. I would say there was nothing left unsaid, but there was a lot we wanted to say. That Saturday I was at a concert with one of our starving artists, and it was about a half an hour before it began, and I started crying. I don't think I told you this, Bruce. And I truly believe, and there was no reason to cry, except, I don't know, there was no reason to cry. And when I talked to Bruce later, it was about that time that Carol passed. And I think that was that angel who was coming and tapping you on the shoulder to say goodbye and had given you what you need in order to travel this journey. So I'd say I'm very sad. There's a void. And it's sometimes that the patient actually comes into your life so that you become a better physician. And you get to learn life's lessons. And I will tell you this, that no matter what doctors tell you, and I think Carol showed us this, the doctors are always wrong. But she showed us these many miracles. And I thank her for being my friend, my sister, my aunt, my mother, whatever it is. She's irreplaceable. So I live on, we all live on with Carol's name written on our heart. And knowing that sometimes that we just have these angels who are here to say, don't take yourself so seriously. And to not miss out on the rest of our lives. It's been an honor to be on this journey with her.
Now that everybody else has been interrupted, we just keep the grandchildren out. We were married for 46 years and 8 months. And I had known for some time that we were unlikely to make it together to our golden anniversary. So on September 12th of this year, we went to the Earl for dinner. And at 7:15 p.m., I said, now is the moment 50 years ago that we met. So we did get to celebrate the 50th anniversary of something. Ironically, Carol never remembered our meeting. I, on the other hand, did and do, and it's understandable. She was a sophomore member of the Student Government Council. I was a politically ambitious freshman in my first weeks at school. I went to an SGC meeting with a dorm mate, and he introduced us in the elevator of the Student Activities Building. She was beautiful, of course, but to me the more impressive thing was how engaged she was. During a break, she sat cross-legged in a corner with a group who had approached SGC on some issue, trying to figure out how to advance their cause. More than the elevator, that is the image that sticks with me. In many ways, it is the quintessence of her life. She spent countless hours with countless groups, sitting cross-legged in countless corners, working to advance their causes, large and small. It was not love at first sight. Our story is not a romantic comedy. Sparks did not fly across the room. I did not go home and write, "Oh, I just met the woman I'm going to marry." Romance bloomed 2 years later while we were both working at the university cellar. But when we started dating, we fell in love quickly and we fell hard. 3 months later, we were living together. After a year and a half, we were married. Carol was a born feminist. It had to be nature over nurture. For in the nurture category, her father believed that it was important for her to take typing so she would be able to get a job as a secretary. You may wonder, how did she do in that typing class? Are you kidding? She was not going to do anything in preparation for being a secretary. Now, someone took typing in high school, and that someone typed all her graduate school papers before there was word processing. But it was not as magnanimous as it sounds. In exchange, I was allowed the indulgence of an IBM correcting selector typewriter. There's another early feminist story that I love. As Neill told you, she was a strong swimmer. She got a job as a lifeguard at the YMCA. And then the Y had to cut back. And so they fired all the girl lifeguards. Woo! Because, after all, high school boys needed jobs more than high school girls. Now, we will never know the precise details of the conversation between Carol and Y management, although we can guess. What we do know is that she and many of the other girls kept their jobs. I have labeled her a righteous feminist. You've heard that word righteous several times today. She could be righteous in other ways. It was well known in our family that you did not want to be an intransient bureaucrat on the other side of the counter from Carol. When she felt she was being mistreated, her wrath was epic and almost always effective. Anthony and Evelyn and I have a vivid memory of a hotel lobby where we arrived early to find that they did not have a room ready for us. She went to work on the clerk, while the three of us slithered away behind the pillar. We got the room, of course, and she said to us, "You like the results, don't you?" We replied, "Yes, but we don't want to watch it happen." So here is lesson number 1. There's going to be 3. Lesson number 1 from her life. To quote Mitch McConnell, nevertheless, she persisted. Carol showed us that now and again, everyone needs to be pushy, especially women. She stood up for herself, she stood up for her family, and she stood up for countless others. Most of you know that we traveled extensively. In the lobby, you can see a pin map of the places we traveled to. As a traveler, she hungered for nature, scenery, art, culture, street life, and of course, food. She loved the cactus and flowers in Tucson, the canyons in Utah, the mountains in Colorado, the coral and fish in the Virgin Islands, the humpback whales in Hawaii, the sea otters in Alaska, the elephants and lions in Botswana, the rigidly organized Adriatic beaches in Italy, the temples and peoples of Bhutan, the scarlet macaws in Costa Rica, the orangutans of Borneo, the Roman ruins all over Italy, the ruins and temples in Cambodia. The penguins on the Falkland Islands, the pelicans on Captiva Island, the blue-footed boobies, and the albatross on the Galapagos Islands. The blue whales and dolphins in the Sea of Cortez, and the street markets in every corner of the globe. There are three animals that particularly touched her. First are the gray whales in St. Ignacio Bay in the Baja Peninsula. These gray whales have decided to be friendly with people, and they were a major reason for our visit to Baja. We had a mother and baby come up to the boat to be petted, if you can call touching a whale petting. As they left, the baby lifted its tail and sprayed us. Second are the wild dogs of Botswana. One of our camps had a pack of 19 in residence. Third are the sandhill cranes by our dock on Parkway. Every summer, we had a family of 3 cranes that would fly in during the evening with their characteristic trumpeting that never failed to fill her heart. In the travel map in the lobby, you may notice that there are no pins in Italy. That's because Italy needs its own map with its own pins, and you can see that map in the lobby. Carol seemed to always know that Italy was her place. It is the perfect confluence of so many things she loved. In 1991, she told me we had to go to Italy, so we did. I think it's fair to say that for us, Italy was love at first sight. When we got home, she said, "We have to go back." I said, "Sure, we'll go back in 3 or 4 years, that'd be fun." She said, "No, we have to go back next year." So we did. We made 20 trips to Italy, spending a total of more than 400 days in the country. My explanation to the Italians was always, "Condividiamo la fatica. Io studio italiano, la contessa invece studia Italia." For those of you who don't speak Italian, we share the effort. I study Italian. The Countess instead studies Italy, and study Italy she did. Her library of books on Italy numbers more than 24 volumes, and that's not counting any of the travel guides. And on her desk at the time of her death was this little volume, Prisoners of Hope, The Silver Age of Italian Jews, 1924 to 1974. That's arcane. She was taken with a Risorgimento, which is often portrayed as the unification of Italy, but which she saw as the North conquering and then exploiting the South. She was a major fan of the Etruscans, who predated the Roman Empire. 2 years ago, she took me to an Etruscan necropolis north of Rome. She loved the little quirks of modern Italian life, especially the pageantry and downright weirdness of Italian festivals. We watched teams race statues of saints up a mountain, watched Italians race uphill on stilts, and watched the symbolic mating of a male and female tree. Lori decided to stay in the villa that day, so she missed that one, but CL saw it. Everywhere we traveled, she was always the student transformed into the teacher. Everyone in the family has memories of wandering through some famous place, with Carol reading the explanation from one of her omnipresent guidebooks. Her travels were enriched by her insatiable curiosity. You might be surprised to learn that Carol could be a sports fan. 2 sports stick out, women's gymnastics and men's basketball. For decades, she was a serious fan of both teams. In 1989, she traveled to Lexington to see the basketball team win the regional tournament on the way to the national championship. And in 1992, she took the train to Minneapolis to watch the Fab Five come up 1 game short. She made a dozen trips to the NCAA Women's Gymnastics Championships all over the country. She was quick to let you know that basketball referees were highly unfair to Michigan and did not understand what a foul was. But her real scorn was saved for gymnastic judges who constantly scored Michigan too low, while scoring other schools, particularly Georgia, too high. Carol had another strident opinion. Every time a basketball player missed a free throw, she would insist that they should be forced to shoot underhand, the way girls did in high school. Time after time, I patiently mansplained to her that you wanted a consistent jump shot, practiced over and over, and you wanted to use that jump shot for free throws as well as regular shots. Then came her moment of triumph. Malcolm Gladwell has a podcast called Revisionist History. He did a show describing how Rick Barry, one of the best free throw shooters ever, shot free throws underhand, and how Wilt Chamberlain, one of the worst ever, had his best free throw percentage during the year that Barry convinced him to use the underhand technique. It turns out that underhand is without question a better way to shoot free throws. She was right, I was wrong, she was delighted, and so was I. Here's lesson number 2 from her life. Mario Cuomo said, in this life you should read everything you can read, taste everything you can taste, meet everyone you can meet, travel everywhere you can travel, learn everything you can learn, experience everything you can experience. She did all of those. And we can add one more that Cuomo was forced to leave out. Drink everything you can drink. He became my bartender, offering up a delicious craft cocktail every evening. You've already heard plenty about what Carol's life meant to other women. On her behalf, I want to highlight just one heartfelt cause. A college class on racism opened her eyes to the devastating impact of prejudice and institutional racism. Throughout her life, she had a special concern for and affinity with women who coped with the double whammy of sexism and racism. In 1994, she took great pride when CEW created the Women of Color in the Academy Project, which endures today. And in retirement, she became an active supporter of Alternatives for Girls, which works to better the lives of marginalized girls in Detroit. Wherever we traveled, she constantly engaged with local women. She was particularly enamored of women's folk art, and we have a substantial collection from around the world. Eventually, Carol found an artistic muse within herself, and she set about making beautiful bead jewelry. We wound up in bead stores all over the world. I had to rush to come up with the Italian word for wholesale when we visited the island of Murano near Venice. She even wound up selling her jewelry through Artistica and Dexter and Abracadabra in Ann Arbor, and so now we're rich. Those of you suffering with university pensions, okay. Now, Carol was not one of those people who had a lifelong burning desire to be a mother. For many years, we thought we would not have children, and then we changed. She was not obsessed with her children, but she loved and enjoyed them. Anthony and Evelyn will tell you that she did not hesitate to provide advice and guidance, and instructions, and rules, and commandments, but they knew to push back, and she was gratified by the independence that they showed and the lives they built for themselves. She was proud of Anthony's stunning paintings as well as his initiative in starting a furniture manufacturing business. She was proud of Evelyn's poetry and her career as a burlesque dancer, as well as her eventual decision to become a children's librarian. One amusing theme of her advice to the children was how to stay safe and healthy. Fall through the ice, have an untreatable infection, try to swim to the island, eat a tainted apple. You could hardly pick a potential danger without Carol relating the story of someone she knew who had died that way. Anthony once mentioned a podcast on rabies and added, "I suppose Mom knows somebody who died of rabies." She replied, "Actually, I do." All of this fear was compounded by a grandmother, my mother, enraptured with Google's ability to find exotic diseases to fit mundane symptoms. One of the best things Carol did for her children and her nephews was to be a model of a mother balancing competing priorities of life. Parents constantly make trade-offs and compromises. You really can't have it all. But she came damn close. And I think it's fair to say that she made them all feminists, Let's go a step further. She also made me a feminist. Family was always important to Carol. Neill has told you how close we all were. She was also blessed by one special addition to her family, our niece, the unstoppable Lori Walters. Lori lived with us for quite some time, and she and Carol became especially close. The two made a formidable team, and when they got set on a project, I knew better than to try to interfere. So we come to the cancer. Carol coped with metastatic breast cancer with uncommon dignity and grace. She never let the disease define her. Our oncology crew was marvelous in their understanding that quality of life was more important than length of life. Time and again, they jiggered the treatment schedule to fit our travels. We are grateful for their love and for their outstanding care. She opted to ignore the prognosis and focus on treatment and living. The inevitable end did not detract from her enjoyment of the time she had. Our slogan from the beginning was Carpe Anno, seize the year. In the 11 years following her metastatic diagnosis, we spent 13 days in Honduras, 14 days in Utah, 19 days in Vail, 21 days in Bhutan, 25 days in Indonesia, 64 days in Florida, 66 days in New York, 121 days in Arizona, 135 days on a cruise ship, and 228 days in Italy. Right up to the end, she managed to grab one more thing after another. So this is lesson number 3 from Carol's life. She understood what Martin Luther King called the fierce urgency of now, not carpe diem. You don't need to make every day be the best day it can be, but carpe anno. Make this year be the best year it can be. And if you can, do it again next year. We managed to do it for 11 years in a row. It is a lesson that I, for one, intend to honor for as long as I'm here. To Carol's great credit, where are they? Where's the other? I need you guys. You know, I didn't put up with them. Yeah, I don't know that I can hold everybody. To Carol's great credit, she never pressed her children to hurry up with the grandchildren. Even after her cancer turned out to be metastatic, she remained calm and cool. Her patience was rewarded as she lived to see and enjoy all 4 of her grandchildren. She had wonderful times with Omar as we swiped him from his parents. She loved reading to Abe, who constantly brought books to her and climbed up in her lap. Wait. All right. You go to Uncle Tony. You come here. Thank you. She savored Lola, who did everything faster than either of the boys. Lola is really the one channeling Carol. She is the only girl among 8 children of that generation, and we expect Lola to rule them all. And then the final act. When Carol entered hospice, Evelyn's due date was still 4 weeks away. The expert opinion was that Carol would not survive to see his birth, and she was unlikely to even make it to her 69th birthday. As you can imagine, this compounded our grief at losing her. But, nevertheless, she persisted. And for the first time, but probably not the last time, Finn stepped up. There you go, that's our grandfather's curse. You're Lola, that I know. Finn stepped up. 2 weeks early, he decided it was time to get out, and he was born the day before her birthday. Evelyn channeled her mother's determination and persistence to browbeat the hospital into releasing her the next day. Carol's final birthday was spent surrounded by the love of all of her children and grandchildren. Best day of my life. Now, I don't have the words. We're sitting here, you all have the words. Anthony, are you going to start?
Yes, sure. You want to say something? Okay. You said you wanted to say something about Nona.
You go first.
Oh, I'll go first. Well, I'm going to talk about singing. That's something Nona really liked to do. Yeah. All right. So, unfortunately, with the passing of my mother, our family is out its best singer by far and away. So you're going to have to deal with me beginning Amazing Grace. So I'll step away from the mic quickly to say to you the pain that we feel during every happy birthday that we have. But she was passionate about music and loved to sing. Sometimes with a lot of vibrato, and she also would sing along to songs she didn't know, and hang just behind the beat because she wanted to know it so badly, but she didn't. But she loved it so much, and the time that Carmen mentioned bringing the singers to my folks' house, I showed up as a surprise last Christmas. Right after that had happened, and she showed me the video over and over and over again. She was just glowing and so happy to have those starving artists there. So we're going to all sing Amazing Grace, which is actually a song I sing to my children every night before they go to sleep. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace that brought me safe thus far, and lead me home. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we know that stays to sing God's praise. And when we first begun.
I'm going to close with a poem by Mary Oliver. I read this poem at my mom's retirement party. It really reminds me of her in so many ways. Her lack of cynicism, her determination, her anger directed in all the right places, and her love directed in all the right places. And it's called The Poet with His Face in His Hands. You want to cry aloud for your mistakes, but to tell the truth, the world doesn't need any more of that sound. So if you're going to do it and can't stop yourself, If your pretty mouth can't hold it in, at least go by yourself across the 40 fields and the 40 dark inclines of rocks and water to the place where the falls are flinging out their white sheets like crazy. And there is a cave behind all that jubilation and water fun, and you can stand there under it and roar all you want, and nothing will be disturbed. You can drip with despair all afternoon, and still, on a green branch, its wings just lightly touched by the passing foil of the water, the thrush, puffing out its spotted breast, will sing of the perfect, stone-hard beauty of everything.